The night was quiet. A stillness lay across the land, the kind that comes only in the hours before dawn, when even the wind seems reluctant to stir the trees. Above, the heavens stretched in endless silence. Constellations traced familiar shapes across the velvet dark patterns that people had watched for thousands of years. The stars seemed eternal, steady, and comforting. And then, without warning, the sky cracked open. A streak of light tore across the heavens, brighter than the moon, casting shadows on the earth below. It moved with terrifying speed, a burning scar across the night, leaving a trail of fire and smoke. For those who saw it, there was no time to react, no prayer to whisper. The light grew into a second sun, and then silence was consumed by sound. The impact came like the anger of the gods, a roar that flattened forests, a shockwave that raced across plains and mountains. The earth shook, rivers rose, and the air itself seemed to ignite. In a single night, the world changed. This is not imagination alone. We know the earth has been struck by meteors before. The evidence lies in craters gouged deep into the crust, in layers of melted rock, in fragments of cosmic stone scattered like bones of the sky. The scar of Chicxulub in Mexico still whispers of the day, 66 million years ago, when the dinosaurs were erased by fire and shadow. Humanity has walked a more fragile line, and we too live under the silent threat of stones that wander the void. But what if such a strike did more than extinguish animals? What if it ended a civilization? Not the one we know today, but another, older, forgotten, for centuries. Myths have carried the memory of disasters, floods, fire from the sky, nights that lasted for years. Mainstream history tells us that civilization, as we understand it, began only a few thousand years ago, with the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the first cities and kingdoms. Before that, we are told, humanity lived as scattered bands of hunters and gatherers, gradually learning the arts of farming, writing, and building. And yet, questions linger. What if the story is not as simple as we believe? What if a meteor once struck the Earth during humanity's deep prehistory, not only changing the climate, but erasing a world advanced in ways we struggle to imagine? Imagine a people who mastered stone, who mapped the stars, who built monuments now buried beneath the sea or broken by time. Imagine their knowledge, their traditions, their homes, reduced in a single night to ash and ruin. For their descendants, the survivors, only fragments would remain. Memories would be carried not in books, but in stories whispered by firelight, stories that became myths, myths that became legends. The night the sky fell may not only belong to the dinosaurs, it may belong to us. Scientists call these cosmic visitors near-Earth objects, silent wanderers whose paths cross our planet's orbit. Most pass without notice. Some burn harmlessly in the atmosphere, streaking as meteors before vanishing. But a few are large enough to survive the descent, to strike with the energy of thousands of nuclear weapons. They do not ask permission. They arrive without warning. And history, as fragile as glass, shatters in their wake. Across the world, there are scars that hint at such encounters. Craters in Siberia and Arizona, fields of shattered stone in Africa, melted glass in the deserts of Libya. Each a reminder that the Earth is not a safe cradle, but a battlefield between sky and stone. If a great strike had occurred in the age before writing, how would we know? Perhaps only through silence. The silence of missing records. The silence of ruins whose builders remain nameless. The silence of civilizations that left behind monuments, but not words. It is in this silence that imagination begins to weave. The philosopher Plato once wrote of Atlantis, a mighty civilization that fell in a single day and night of catastrophe. His story has been debated for centuries. Was it allegory? Was it myth? Or was it the dim echo of a memory? A memory of a night when fire rained from the heavens and the sea swallowed the land? Meanwhile, Modern science speaks of an event 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, when the planet suddenly plunged back into cold. Megafauna vanished. Human populations collapsed. Some researchers believe a comet or meteor may have struck then, triggering wildfires and climate chaos. Others remain skeptical, pointing to more gradual explanations. But the question lingers like smoke after fire. Could this have been the night the sky fell on an earlier humanity? Odd fact, every single day, Earth is bombarded by more than 100 tons of space dust. Most of it burns away unnoticed. Yet history shows that it only takes one large fragment, one forgotten stone from the edge of the solar system, to reset the course of life itself. Picture a people standing on a shoreline 12,000 years ago. Their villages are built of stone and wood. They fish the rivers, tend gardens, watch the stars. Suddenly, the horizon flares with unnatural light. Birds scatter, animals panic. A roaring wind arrives before the fire does. Then, silence, followed by darkness that lasts not for hours, but for seasons. Crops fail. Waters rise. The survivors wander, carrying only memories. Centuries later, their descendants tell stories of gods angry with humanity, of floods that drowned the world, of fire that fell from the sky. We call these stories myth. But what if they are history retold in poetry? The night the sky fell is more than a question about the past. It is a mirror held to the present. Our own world, with its cities of glass and steel, with its delicate systems of electricity and trade, would fare no better. A single strike today would be enough to erase centuries of progress. Satellites would fall silent. Crops would wither under a sun dimmed by dust. Nations would collapse in the chaos. And so, when we look into the past and wonder whether an earlier humanity was destroyed by a meteor, we are also asking another question. How close are we to sharing their fate? The chapter closes with silence again. The sky is quiet once more, as it is tonight. The stars gleam as they always have, serene and eternal. Yet somewhere beyond, fragments of stone wander through the dark, patient and indifferent. One day, one of them may return. What will be remembered then? At first glance, the modern world feels invincible. Cities stretch like constellations across the earth, their lights visible from orbit. Towers of steel rise into the clouds, their foundations anchored in bedrock. Trains and planes knit continents together. The glow of screens brings news from across the globe in an instant. Humanity, it seems, has woven itself into a web too vast to break. And yet, beneath the glitter, our world is fragile. Consider how quickly the lights would go out if a single thread were cut. A storm can silence an entire city. A failure in a power grid can darken thousands of homes. A disruption in shipping lanes leaves supermarket shelves empty within days. For all its appearance of permanence, civilization is a delicate balance of systems. Food, water, energy, communication, each dependent on the other. Break one, and the rest tremble. Now imagine the strike of a meteor. Not one that ended the dinosaurs, but one smaller, more subtle, yet devastating enough to strike at our fragile links. The sky burns, shockwaves roll across the land, and dust lifts high into the atmosphere. The sun grows pale, crops fail, and within months, the illusion of stability collapses. History offers glimpses of how quickly societies can unravel. The eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 filled the skies with ash. The following year became known as the year without a summer. Frost struck in June. Crops withered in Europe, Asia, and North America. Famine followed, and so did unrest. And yet Tambora was a local event compared to the global shadow cast by a meteor. Civilization, at its heart, is an agreement among people. To farm, to build, to trade, to trust. But trust is brittle when food runs short, when rivers run dry, when the skies refuse to clear. It takes centuries to build and only days to fracture. Odd fact, in 1962, a small geomagnetic storm knocked out parts of a Canadian power grid. In 1989, another storm left millions without electricity in Quebec. These were natural events caused not by meteors, but by solar flares. Imagine then the electromagnetic chaos unleashed by a cosmic impact, where shockwaves ripple not only through Earth, but through the delicate electronics that guide our lives. It is tempting to believe our ancestors lived in simpler, sturdier times. Hunters and gatherers moved with the seasons, less dependent on fragile networks. But even they were vulnerable. A sudden drought, a failed migration of animals, an unexpected flood, each was enough to scatter entire groups, to reduce their traditions to silence. If they had built something greater, something beyond the scale we imagine, it would have been just as fragile. One night of fire from the heavens could erase it. Archaeologists tell us that most of the Earth's human history is missing. Wood rots, cloth decays. Even stone crumbles with wind and rain. Without writing, memory lives only in people, and people do not live forever. Civilizations, especially early ones, can vanish almost without a trace. A meteor strike is not the only possible cause, but it is among the most merciless. Picture an early society thriving on fertile plains at the end of the Ice Age. They fish from broad rivers, harvest grains, shape stones into circles and walls. Knowledge passes from elders to children, growing slowly, patiently. Then one night the stars erupt. Fire rains from above. Their villages ignite. Their fields wither under blackened skies. Within a generation, their wisdom is reduced to whispers. Centuries later, their descendants tell of gods who punished mankind, of floods that swallowed the earth, of fire that came without warning. The memory of fragility becomes myth. Modern science often points out that we have no evidence of such civilizations before the known rise of agriculture. And yet, the silence in the record may itself be a clue. Catastrophe erases. Seas rise and bury coastlines. Deserts cover once fertile valleys. A strike from the sky accelerates this erasure, reducing centuries of achievement to fragments scattered in the soil. Odd fact, more than 80% of human settlements throughout history have been coastal. With sea levels more than 100 meters lower during the Ice Age, countless ancient shores now lie beneath the waves. If a civilization thrived there and was struck by disaster, much of its story would be drowned, hidden beyond reach. What this reveals is that civilization is never as permanent as it appears. Whether carved in stone or coated in silicon, all is vulnerable. We build towers, but they crumble. We write books, but they burn. We save knowledge on drives and servers, but they depend on power, fragile as a heartbeat. And so the question arises, if a meteor ended one civilization before, how many others might have fallen unnoticed, swept from history before they could even write their names? In this way, fragility is not weakness alone. It is also possibility. For fragility means impermanence, and impermanence leaves space for mystery. It leaves us wondering who came before us and what was lost when the sky fell. The story of fragility is the story of us. For every monument that survives, 1,000 have been erased. For every name carved into stone, 1,000 voices have been silenced. We know only fragments. And fragments, when pieced together, form not a full picture, but a puzzle with missing edges. As we stand in the present, with satellites circling above and cities glowing below, it is tempting to believe that we have outgrown this fragility. But history whispers otherwise. The systems we rely on, water, energy, food, are no more durable than those of the past. They too can fail. They too can collapse. And one strike from the heavens would remind us how thin the walls of our world truly are. The fragility of civilization is not a warning of weakness. It is a reminder of humility. For beneath the lights, beneath the glass and steel, we remain what we have always been, beings dependent on sky, soil, and the balance of a planet that does not bend to our will. If another meteor comes, as one day it surely will, it will not ask if we are ready. The question is not whether the sky can fall. The question is whether we are prepared to endure when it does. The end of the last ice age was supposed to be a time of renewal. The great glaciers that had covered continents were retreating. Rivers swelled with meltwater. Valleys blossomed with new life. Humanity, scattered in small groups across the globe, seemed poised to enter a gentler age. But then, suddenly, the world changed course. Around 12,800 years ago, the climate plunged back into glacial cold. Temperatures dropped with startling speed. Snow returned to lands that had begun to thaw. Plants withered. Animals migrated or vanished. The warming that had promised stability was replaced by a deep and brutal chill. This cold period lasted more than 1,000 years. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas. The cause of this mystery has long puzzled researchers. Mainstream explanations point to natural shifts in the Earth's climate system. As glaciers melted, torrents of fresh water may have poured into the North Atlantic, disrupting the ocean's circulation. Without the steady current that carried warm water northward, Europe and much of the northern hemisphere froze again. It is a tidy explanation, one that fits neatly into the known rhythms of climate. Yet there are pieces that do not settle comfortably into the puzzle. The change was too sudden, too severe. It unfolded not over centuries, but within a single human lifetime. Entire ecosystems collapsed in what felt like the blink of an eye. This abruptness has led some researchers to search for another culprit, one far more dramatic. The controversial Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that a comet or meteor may have struck the Earth or exploded in the atmosphere, unleashing devastation on a global scale. According to this idea, the strike ignited wildfires that swept continents, filling the skies with soot. Dust and debris would have dimmed the sun, plunging the climate back into Ice Age conditions. Evidence for this theory is scattered, yet intriguing. In layers of soil dating to the onset of the Younger Dryas, scientists have found tiny diamonds formed under extreme pressure and spherical droplets of melted rock, as if Earth itself had been blasted into glass. They have uncovered elevated levels of platinum, an element rare on the surface of Earth but common in meteorites. They have found what some call black mats, dark, carbon-rich layers that suggest vast fires once burned across the land. Odd fact, in the American Southwest, one such black layer stretches for miles, marking the same time period when giant animals, mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats disappeared forever. Some researchers believe the impact triggered their extinction. Skeptics, however, caution restraint. They argue that fire, flood, and climate shifts can leave similar marks in the soil. The evidence is circumstantial, open to interpretation. Many in the scientific community remain unconvinced, pointing instead to the steady hand of ocean currents and natural variability. But the questions linger. Could a wandering comet have changed the course of history? Could the Younger Dryas be the scar of a catastrophe written into the Earth itself? Meanwhile, myths from around the world whisper of disasters that echo the scientific debate. Stories of fire in the sky, of floods that swallowed the land, of winters that lasted too long. The Norse told of a Fimbul winter, a season of endless snow. Native American traditions speak of stars that fell and burned the earth. Aboriginal stories describe skies ablaze. These tales, though filtered through generations of storytelling, mirror the timing of the Younger Dryas. Are they coincidence or memory preserved in myth? The mystery deepens when we consider humanity itself. Before the Younger Dryas, evidence shows populations were beginning to settle, experiment with farming, and build more complex societies. After the chill, many of these efforts vanished. Progress stalled. People returned to simpler ways of life, surviving in smaller numbers. It was as if the promise of civilization had been interrupted. This interruption is the heart of the question. If the Younger Dryas was indeed caused by a meteor, then it was not only a geological event, it was a civilizational reset. A reminder that human progress does not move in a straight line, but in fragile arcs easily broken by disaster. Odd fact, the Greenland ice cores, which record the history of Earth's climate in layers of frozen water, show the Younger Dryas arriving within a decade, the span of a single human childhood. For those who lived it, the change was not distant history. It was daily life. Rivers freezing, game disappearing, skies dimming. Survival became uncertain. The mainstream view continues to frame the Younger Dryas as a natural event. But the impact theory lingers on the edges of science, drawing interest precisely because of its power to reshape how we understand our past. If true, it means that humanity's path was redirected by a moment of fire from the heavens. That civilization might have flowered earlier, sooner, had the sky not intervened. Imagine what was lost. Not only animals, but traditions, experiments in farming, seeds of culture that never had the chance to grow. Imagine how many stories were silenced in that sudden winter. How many voices vanished before they could be written into history. The Younger Dryas remains an unresolved chapter, a question without a final answer. Was it water and currents alone? Or was it the echo of a cosmic impact, the night sky breaking open above an unsuspecting world? The mystery is more than academic, for it reminds us that the Earth's story is not smooth or steady. It is punctuated by shocks, reversals, catastrophes. And in those moments, civilizations, whether emerging or established, are most vulnerable. The world 12,800 years ago stood at the threshold of change. Humanity was ready to step forward into a new age. Instead, the door closed, slammed by cold and darkness. Only much later, when the Younger Dryas ended, would progress resume. But what if something more than climate was lost in that interval? What if an earlier chapter of civilization was erased by a single cosmic event? What if the Younger Dryas was not simply an age of ice, but the grave of a forgotten world? When fire comes from the earth, it is terrifying enough. A volcano erupts, and ash chokes the sky. Lightning strikes a forest, and flames spread from tree to tree. But when fire comes from the heavens, it changes everything. Researchers studying the onset of the Younger Dryas have uncovered a peculiar layer in the soil, a layer darkened and charred, stretching across continents. Archaeologists call it the black mat. It appears in North America, in Europe, in the Middle East. Wherever it is found, it tells the same story. Something burned, and it burned everywhere. The black mat is not a single event frozen in stone, but a boundary, a mark between worlds. Beneath it lie the remains of a planet warming, animals thriving, humans experimenting with agriculture and settlement. Above it, the world is colder, emptier, changed. What caused this veil of soot? Some suggest wildfires, ignited by natural climate shifts. As temperatures swung wildly, forests dried, and flames swept across vast distances. But others see signs of something more violent. They point to evidence of tiny diamonds, nanodiamonds, formed under pressure so intense they speak of cosmic violence. They point to glass-like spherules, droplets of rock melted and flung into the air, raining down as the earth itself boiled. They point to elevated levels of platinum, rare in the crust but common in the stones that wander the void. Odd fact, in South Carolina at a site called Topper, archaeologists uncovered tools crafted by human hands. Above them lay the black mat, dark and carbon-rich. The people who had made those tools disappeared from the record, as if erased by fire. The picture painted is unsettling. A comet fragment or meteor enters the atmosphere, perhaps breaking apart as it descends. Fireballs streak across the sky, igniting forests. Shockwaves flatten grasslands. Debris rains down, and in moments, continents blaze. For animals caught in the inferno, there is no escape. For humans, survival becomes a desperate struggle. Some scientists resist this vision. They argue that fire is common in the natural world. Lightning has always ignited forests. Climate change itself can trigger massive burns. Why invoke the heavens when Earth itself is capable of destruction? Their skepticism is grounded in caution, a reminder that extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And yet, the scale of burning seems unusual. Charcoal layers stretch for thousands of miles. Soot appears in ice cores from Greenland, suggesting the fires were not local, but global. Entire ecosystems seem to have shifted abruptly. The coincidence with the Younger Dryas onset, the timing of cold, the vanishing of animals, the disruption of human societies is difficult to ignore. Meanwhile, myths echo the possibility of fire across continents. Native American stories speak of the long winter when stars fell and flames consumed the plains. Aboriginal tales describe fire raining from the heavens, scorching the land. Norse legends speak of Ragnarok, a cosmic fire that ends an age. Whether these are memories of natural burns or distant recollections of something greater, the resonance is striking. Odd fact, in the Libyan desert, sheets of glass cover the sands. Their origin has long puzzled scientists. Some argue they were formed by meteor impact, the heat fusing sand into translucent green fragments. Pharaohs prized the glass, shaping it into jewels. One piece was even set into the breastplate of Tutankhamun. Fire from the sky transformed into ornament. If fire did sweep continents 12,800 years ago, it would explain much. The sudden disappearance of mammoths and mastodons. The collapse of human cultures like the Clovis, who once hunted across North America. The abrupt transition in plant life, seen in pollen buried in lakes and bogs. Fire can erase in hours what life took millennia to build. Picture the scene. Forests stretching to the horizon, suddenly lit like torches. Herds stampede, blinded by smoke. Rivers boil at their edges. Ash rises into the atmosphere, dimming the sun. For those who survived, the sky itself must have seemed broken, the order of the world undone. Mainstream science has yet to settle the question. Was the black mat the result of ordinary wildfires, amplified by climate stress? Or was it the fingerprint of something extraordinary, a cosmic impact that unleashed fire on a scale humanity had never seen? The debate continues, with new discoveries adding weight to both sides. Each nanodiamond, each melted droplet of glass, each layer of soot is another fragment of a puzzle whose picture is still incomplete. But one truth is clear. Around 12,800 years ago, the earth burned. And when the flames died, the world was different. The black mat is more than a layer of soil. It is a scar, a reminder etched into the planet itself. A line drawn between what came before and what came after. A line that may mark not only the end of an age of animals, but perhaps the erasure of a forgotten chapter of humanity. And so, as fire once stretched across continents, the question stretches across time. Was it Earth alone that burned itself? Or did the heavens strike the match? In the dim light of an Athenian courtyard, nearly 2,400 years ago, the philosopher Plato told a story. It was a tale passed to him, he claimed, from older traditions, drawn from Egyptian priests and preserved through generations. It was the story of a city so magnificent, so advanced, that it seemed to exist outside of time. Plato called it Atlantis. According to his words, Atlantis was an island empire, larger than Libya and Asia combined. It lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the straits we now call Gibraltar. Its people were skilled in navigation, in engineering, in governance. They built concentric rings of canals and walls, a marvel of geometry and order. They commanded fleets, traded across seas, and gathered wealth beyond measure. To the Athenians of Plato's age, Atlantis was both a vision of greatness and a warning against arrogance. But then came its end. In a single day and night of catastrophe, Plato said, Atlantis sank beneath the waves. Fire, earthquakes, and floods consumed it. The mighty empire was gone, swallowed by the sea, remembered only in words. For centuries, the story has haunted the imagination. Was Atlantis a metaphor for hubris, a philosopher's allegory? Or was it memory, distorted perhaps, but rooted in something real? If we look through the lens of cosmic catastrophe, Plato's words take on a haunting clarity. What if Atlantis was not simply drowned by ordinary earthquakes or tsunamis? What if its destruction was tied to fire from the heavens, a meteor that shattered the balance of the earth? The timing is curious. Atlantis was said to have fallen around 9,000 years before Plato's time, a date that aligns, roughly, with the end of the Younger Dryas. This was the period of abrupt climate change, when the world shivered under sudden cold, then warmed again. Sea levels rose more than 100 meters, swallowing coastlines, erasing lands where people had lived for millennia. If ever there was a moment for a great island empire to vanish, it was then. Imagine it, a culture flourishing at the edge of the Ice Age, building harbors and temples, mapping the stars. Their wealth depends on fertile land and stable seas. Then one night, the sky ignites. A meteor or comet fragment strikes the ocean or land, triggering tsunamis, fires, and climate upheaval. Within hours, their cities crumble. Within generations, their name is a memory carried in story. Odd fact, geologists have identified submerged landscapes beneath the North Sea, once home to vast plains called Doggerland. 10,000 years ago, rivers and forests stretched where waves now roll. Entire communities lived there, hunting, fishing, building, until rising seas drowned it all. If Doggerland could vanish, why not an Atlantis? The echoes of Atlantis ripple through other myths. The Bible speaks of a flood that covered the earth. Mesopotamian tablets describe Utnapishtim surviving the deluge in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Maya told of worlds destroyed by fire and water before the current one. Across cultures, we find the same pattern: memory of catastrophe, memory of loss. Plato's Atlantis fits into this chorus, another voice recalling the night the world was undone. Skeptics argue that Atlantis was never meant as history. Plato, they remind us, used allegory often, shaping tales to teach moral lessons. Atlantis, in this view, was not real but symbolic, a warning about greed, hubris, and the fragility of power. And yet, why place the catastrophe in a distant, prehistoric past? Why describe its geography with such precision? Why insist it was told by priests of Egypt, guardians of ancient memory? Some researchers suggest that Plato's tale could be a distortion of real events, a story told and retold, reshaped over millennia. Egyptian scribes may have preserved fragments of an older disaster, woven into myth, then passed to Solon, to Plato, and to us. If so, then Atlantis may not have been a single city or empire, but a memory of lost coastlines, drowned lands, shattered societies. A memory of a world struck by catastrophe, preserved in the only way fragile civilizations can survive, in story. Picture an island kingdom on the edge of the Atlantic. Its harbors are filled with ships, its streets with markets. Children play in courtyards, priests study the stars. Then, in a single day, the ocean heaves. Walls crack, fires rage, the sea swallows homes. Survivors cling to rafts, but the empire is gone. When they speak of it to their children, their voices tremble with the weight of what was lost. Plato's words may not be literal truth, but neither need they be pure invention. Between allegory and memory lies a gray space, where myth is born from the ashes of real events. If fire once fell from the sky, if seas once rose to drown entire worlds, then Atlantis may be less fantasy than fragment, a shard of memory from a time when the heavens themselves were enemies. Odd fact, in 2018, researchers found evidence of an ancient crater beneath Greenland's ice, 30 kilometers wide. Its age is debated, but some believe it could date to the Younger Dryas. If confirmed, it would stand as direct evidence of a massive impact, capable of reshaping climate and devastating human societies. If an advanced community lived nearby, its destruction might echo in stories like Plato's. Atlantis, in this light, becomes not a single place, but a symbol of all that was lost when fire met water, when the sky fell and the seas rose. It becomes the name we give to forgotten worlds erased by catastrophe, remembered only in myth. As the flames of Chapter 4 give way to Plato's drowned empire, the thread is clear. Humanity has always carried the memory of fragility, of civilizations ending not in gradual decline, but in sudden disaster. Atlantis may not rise from the waves to prove its reality, but its story rises each time we look at the stars and wonder what has been forgotten and what might one day be erased again. The ocean is vast, restless, and secretive. Its surface reflects the sun and the stars, but beneath, it hides entire worlds. Mountains taller than the Alps lie drowned in darkness. Canyons deeper than any on land cut across its floor. And once, along its shifting edge, humanity built its earliest homes. During the last ice age, the seas were not as we know them. So much of Earth's water was locked in glaciers, the shorelines stretched far beyond their modern reach. Rivers ran wider, valleys broader, coasts more generous. Vast plains connected islands, and continents wore shapes we would not recognize today. And the ice melted, slowly at first, then in sudden pulses. Torrents of water rushed into the oceans, and the seas rose. In total, they climbed more than 100 meters. Coastlines retreated inland, swallowing valleys, forests, and settlements. Entire worlds vanished beneath the waves. Archaeologists estimate that nearly 2/3 of humanity's early settlements were coastal. People have always been drawn to the sea, for food, for trade, for exploration. If those ancient settlements stood on shores now drowned, then most of our earliest history lies hidden beneath the ocean. Odd fact, off the coast of India lies the sunken city of Dwarka, a place mentioned in Hindu texts. Divers have found walls, streets, and stone structures beneath the waves. Some date the ruins to thousands of years before known Indian civilizations. Are they echoes of myth or something even older, preserved in silence? The same mystery appears off the coast of Japan. Near Yanaguni, divers discovered what seems to be a staircase carved into rock, descending into the depths. Some argue it is natural geology. Others see the hand of human design, a monument swallowed by the rising sea. Further west, the Black Sea hides another story. Beneath its waters lie the remains of ancient shorelines, suggesting that a catastrophic flood once transformed it from a lake into a sea. Some believe this event lingers in memory as the biblical flood, a deluge so great it became myth. Everywhere the seas touch land, they guard secrets. Sonar surveys reveal lost river channels and submerged mountains. Occasionally, fishermen dredge up artifacts, tools, bones, shards of pottery, pulled from depths where no land has existed for millennia. These fragments hint at lives erased, their context dissolved in salt and tide. Imagine standing on a shoreline 12,000 years ago. Before you lies not ocean, but fertile plain. Herds graze on grasses where fish now swim. Villages cluster along rivers that no longer exist. And year by year, the waters rise. At first, families retreat only a little, carrying their belongings inland. But the sea does not stop. It advances relentlessly until the old villages are gone, drowned forever. The memory of them becomes story, tales of gods who swallowed land, of floods that ended ages. Plato's Atlantis may be one such story, but countless others echo the same theme. Polynesian myths speak of islands sinking beneath the sea. Celtic legends tell of sunken kingdoms beneath the waves. In Welsh folklore, Cantre'r Gweled was a fertile land drowned after its defenses failed. In every corner of the globe, cultures remember what the ocean has taken. Mainstream archaeology hesitates at these claims. Ruins beneath the sea are difficult to prove, often blurred by natural forces. Stone can fracture into shapes that mimic walls and steps. Dating submerged sites is notoriously challenging. And yet, the persistence of these stories suggests that people remembered, carried forward, and reshaped memories of real events. Odd fact: in 2001, sonar scans off the coast of Cuba revealed massive structures nearly 700 meters below the surface, resembling geometric shapes and pyramids. The depth suggests they would have been dry land at least 10,000 years ago. Debate continues over whether they are natural or man-made. If human, they would rewrite history as we know it. The ocean is a destroyer of evidence. Salt corrodes, currents scatter, and time marries. What survives does so by miracle. A stone tool lodged in silt, a wall of coral-encrusted masonry, a fragment of memory turned into myth. And so, when we search for our beginnings, we search on land, blind to the greater archive hidden under the waves. But the sea remembers. Its drowned coastlines are silent museums, holding stories too vast for human memory alone. They remind us that civilization could have risen and fallen not once, but many times, each erased by waters that climb without mercy. Picture the lost coastlines as they were, cities bustling with life, harbors filled with sails, markets echoing with trade. Then picture the ocean surging, swallowing streets, pulling down walls, silencing voices. To us, it is myth. To them, it was reality. The lost coastlines are more than vanished land. They are the erased chapters of humanity, perhaps of civilizations older than we dare imagine. Their ruins wait in silence, beneath waves and centuries, while we wonder whether we are the first to build, or merely the first to survive long enough to ask. And as we gaze across the oceans today, we look not only at the surface of water, but at the grave of forgotten worlds. Long before telescopes traced the orbits of comets, long before astronomers mapped the heavens, humanity looked to the night sky with awe and fear. The stars were more than lights. They were ancestors, gods, omens. And when the heavens erupted with fire, those who watched did not forget. They told stories. Stories that still echo today. Across cultures, myths describe skies ablaze, stars falling, and worlds ending in fire. Each story is unique, rooted in its own land and people. Yet beneath the details, they share a haunting pattern, the memory of a shock from the sky. In the Norse sagas, the end of the world is called Ragnarök. It begins with a winter that lasts for years. The Fimbul winter, followed by fire and chaos. The sky splits, stars vanish, and flames engulf the earth. For the Norse, this was not just a prophecy of doom. It was memory woven into myth, a world undone by both ice and fire, and then reborn. Far across the ocean, the Maya spoke of previous worlds destroyed before the present one. In their sacred texts, gods rained down fire and flood to cleanse the earth, erasing humanity again and again until a stable age emerged. Fire from the heavens was not only punishment, but a force of renewal. Among Native American traditions, echoes of burning skies are strong. The Pawnee told of a star that fell, burning the land, leaving scars on Earth itself. The Hopi remembered a fourth world, destroyed by fire and ended by floods. The Cherokee spoke of fiery serpents in the heavens, striking the ground. These are not distant metaphors, but visceral images of catastrophe, passed down through countless generations. Odd fact: in Australia, Aboriginal stories tell of fire falling from the sky, scorching the land until it cracked. Some legends describe fiery eggs sent by ancestral beings. Researchers have found that certain stories align with ancient impact craters still visible in the landscape. Oral tradition, in this case, carried memory for thousands of years, long beyond the lifespan of any monument. The Greeks, too, preserved fragments of celestial fear. In the myth of Phaethon, the son of the sun god Helios seizes his father's chariot and drives it across the sky. Losing control, he veers too close to the earth, setting forests aflame and drying rivers. To save the world, Zeus strikes him down with a thunderbolt. On one level, it is a cautionary tale. On another, it mirrors the terror of fire streaking through the atmosphere. In India, the Mahabharata describes weapons of fire and light hurled across the sky, consuming armies and scorching the earth. While often interpreted as poetic metaphor, the imagery resonates with the chaos of meteors and impacts, remembered in the only language available, that of gods and battles. Even the Bible contains hints of fire from the sky. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is described as a rain of burning stone and sulfur. To ancient eyes, this would have been divine judgment. To modern ears, it sounds eerily like a meteor airburst. These stories, scattered across continents, converge on a single theme: that the heavens are not always calm, that stars can fall, and when they do, the world below changes forever. Skeptics see myth as imagination, shaped by fear of thunder, lightning, and volcanoes. But myths are also vessels carrying memory through time. They preserve what writing cannot, distilling real events into symbols. And when so many cultures recall burning skies, we are left to wonder, did they all imagine the same terror? Or did they witness it? Odd fact, in 1908, a meteor exploded over Tunguska in Siberia, flattening 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers. No crater was left, only devastation. Had such an event struck near a settlement, survivors would have remembered it not as science, but as divine fire. If Tunguska happened once in recorded history, how many others struck in the deep past, remembered only in story? The myths of fire in the sky remind us that the boundary between history and legend is thin. Beneath their poetry may lie the echoes of real catastrophe: comets fragmenting, meteors exploding, fire raining from above. For those who lived through such nights, words could never capture the full terror. But stories could. They became warnings, carried forward, of winters that never ended, of oceans that swallowed the land, of skies that burned. And when we listen to these myths today, across languages and cultures, we hear the same refrain. The heavens are not always kind. The sky can fall. And when it does, civilizations tremble. The Sahara is a place of silence. Its winds whisper across dunes that stretch to the horizon, their shapes shifting like waves frozen in time. Yet buried in this stillness lies a material born not of silence, but of unimaginable violence: glass, scattered across the desert like shards from a broken sky. This is Libyan desert glass. Pale yellow, sometimes translucent green, its pieces lie strewn across hundreds of kilometers of sand. Some are as small as pebbles. Others weigh more than 20 kilograms, their surfaces shaped by forces beyond human comprehension. For centuries, these strange stones were curiosities. Nomads polished them into amulets. Pharaohs prized them as treasures. One jewel, carved from this desert glass, was set into a scarab-shaped pendant that adorned the chest of Tutankhamun himself. To the ancient Egyptians, it was a gift worthy of kings. But what could have created it? Ordinary fire cannot melt sand into such purity. Even volcanic eruptions struggle to leave glass of this clarity and scale. To form Libyan desert glass, temperatures of more than 1,600 degrees Celsius would have been required. Heat fierce enough to fuse the desert floor into translucent sheets. One explanation is impact. A meteor striking the Sahara with immense speed would release energy measured in megatons. In an instant, sand would vaporize, fuse, and fall back to Earth as glass. The evidence, however, is elusive. Unlike other impact sites, no crater has been confirmed. Some argue it has been buried, eroded, or lies hidden beneath shifting dunes. Others suggest the meteor exploded in the atmosphere, a fireball scattering heat across the desert without leaving a scar. Odd fact, in 1996, geologists studying the desert glass found structures called lecatelierite, a form of nearly pure silica that forms only under extreme shock-induced heat. The same material has been found at known impact sites, hinting that the Sahara too once witnessed fire from the sky. Yet not all are convinced. Some researchers propose a different origin, an ancient airburst, like the Tunguska explosion of 1908. A meteor detonating before it reached the ground could generate a wave of heat, intense enough to melt sand across vast areas. Such an event would leave no crater, only the glassy remnants of its fury. To stand in the desert today and hold a fragment of this glass is to touch a frozen moment of catastrophe. Imagine the scene, the sudden flare of light brighter than the sun, a roar splitting the air, heat washing across dunes, searing the very ground. Then silence. The desert absorbs its own memory, leaving behind only fragments of glass, glimmering beneath the sand. For ancient peoples, encountering such stones must have been bewildering. They glittered with unnatural beauty, smoother than river rock, clearer than quartz. To shape them into charms or treasures was to carry a piece of the heavens, a relic of a fire they could not explain. The story of Libyan desert glass reminds us that the earth is filled with hidden testimonies of cosmic encounters. Some are grand craters spanning kilometers, visible from space. Others are subtle, shards of glass scattered across a lonely desert. Together, they form a record not written in words, but in stone and sand. Odd fact, similar glasses exist elsewhere, in the American Southwest, in Argentina. In Central Asia, each speaks of moments when the heavens touched Earth with searing heat. The Sahara's version is simply the most beautiful, the most haunting. Scientists continue to debate its origin, but one truth is undeniable. Libyan desert glass is not ordinary. It is evidence of a force beyond human making, a whisper from the sky, preserved in yellow crystal. As the sun sets over the dunes, the glass glows faintly in the fading light. It is easy to imagine why Tutankhamun's artisans saw it as sacred. To hold such a stone was to hold a fragment of a story far older than any kingdom, a story of fire, of silence, of a night when the desert itself melted. And perhaps, in these fragments, we glimpse not only geology, but memory. A micro-story of catastrophe, woven into the larger tapestry of myths and mysteries that remind us the sky has fallen before, and it will fall again. For all the allure of lost civilizations and cosmic cataclysms, the mainstream story of humanity is slower, steadier, and grounded in evidence that can be touched and measured. Archaeology, anthropology, and genetics paint a picture not of sudden grandeur, but of gradual ascent. The Ice Age was harsh. For tens of thousands of years, small groups of hunter-gatherers roamed across plains and forests, their survival tied to the migrations of animals and the cycles of seasons. They left behind tools chipped from stone, cave paintings of bison and horses, and footprints preserved in mud. Their world was fragile, but it was also enduring, sustained by knowledge passed from parent to child. Then, around 10,000 BCE, the world began to change. Glaciers retreated, rivers swelled, new plants flourished. With this shift came opportunity. In the Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped band of land stretching from the Nile through Mesopotamia, humans began to experiment with seeds. They noticed that some grains grew stronger when scattered near their camps. Slowly, deliberately, they learned to cultivate. This was the beginning of agriculture, and with it, the foundations of civilization. Wheat, barley, and lentils were among the first crops. Sheep, goats, and cattle were tamed. Villages took root where fields grew, and for the first time, humans stayed in one place, tied to the soil. Odd fact, the site of Jericho in modern-day Palestine is one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in the world. Archaeologists have uncovered stone towers there, dating back nearly 9,000 years, built by farmers whose names are long forgotten. Jericho was not a city as we know it, but it was a beginning. From villages came towns, and from towns, cities. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians built the first true urban centers, Uruk, Ur, Eridu. They invented writing etched into clay tablets. They raised ziggurats, monumental temples that pierced the sky. Laws, trade, and astronomy followed. The Sumerians turned memory into record and survival into culture. Meanwhile, along the Nile, the first pharaohs rose. In the Indus Valley, cities like Mohenjo-Daro thrived, complete with streets laid in grids and sophisticated drainage systems. In China, dynasties began to consolidate power, building walls and canals. In the Americas, cultures from the Olmec to the Maya raised pyramids and carved colossal heads from stone. Step by step, humanity built its way upward. The mainstream view sees this process as inevitable, a natural outcome of population growth, climate stability, and human ingenuity. There was no single spark, no golden age lost in fire and flood, but rather countless small moments, a seed planted, an animal tamed, a wall built. Each generation added to the knowledge of the last, and slowly, civilization emerged. Odd fact, the earliest known writing from Sumer was not poetry or myth, but accounting. Clay tablets record rations of grain, taxes, and trade. Before stories of gods, humanity wrote stories of numbers, the practical language of survival and order. This gradualist model emphasizes continuity. While myths speak of sudden destruction, mainstream archaeology speaks of resilience. Even in times of collapse, droughts, wars, invasions, humans adapted, shifted, rebuilt. Civilizations may have fallen, but people endured, carrying forward skills and traditions to new lands and new eras. The contrast between myth and mainstream lies here. One speaks of fire from the sky, sudden loss, and forgotten worlds. The other speaks of persistence, of a long climb from caves to cities, from hunters to kings. Yet both contain truths. For the mainstream narrative reminds us of humanity's capacity to create, to endure, to innovate even in the face of hardship. Without this resilience, we would never have built pyramids, written epics, or sent machines to the stars. Picture the fields of ancient Mesopotamia, shimmering in the heat. Farmers bend to harvest barley, their hands rough, their tools simple. They do not know they are building history, only that their children will eat. Yet from such acts of survival, empires are born. The mainstream view grounds us. It tempers speculation with evidence, reminding us that civilization as we know it is only about 10,000 years old, and that its rise was gradual, shaped by the slow rhythms of nature and the determination of human hands. Still, even in this measured story, shadows remain. For if most of our early settlements were coastal, now drowned, then much of the record is missing. If oral traditions preserve fragments of disaster, then some part of myth may be memory. The mainstream account does not deny catastrophe. It simply frames it as one force among many. In the end, whether civilization rose once, slowly, or many times, broken by fire and flood, one truth remains the same. Humanity has always reached for permanence, carving its presence into stone, clay, and story. And it is through these remnants, humble and monumental alike, that we piece together the path from wilderness to world. History, as written in textbooks, unfolds in orderly stages. Hunters and gatherers give way to farmers, farmers to villages, villages to cities. But scattered across the earth are places that defy this neat progression, ruins so strange, so advanced, that they seem to belong to another timeline altogether. These are the anomalous ruins, standing stones of mystery that whisper forgotten chapters in the human story. High on a hill in southeastern Turkey lies Göbekli Tepe. Buried for millennia, it was uncovered only in the 1990s, and what it revealed stunned archaeologists. Here, massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing more than 20 tons, rise in circles carved with images of lions, scorpions, and birds. The site is more than 11,000 years old, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older even than the cities of Sumer. Yet Göbekli Tepe suggests something different, that people who were supposed to be mere hunters and gatherers gathered here to carve and raise megaliths with astonishing skill. Some researchers call it the world's first temple. Others see it as evidence of social complexity far beyond what should have been possible. Odd fact, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried by its builders around 8000 BCE. Whether as ritual closure or to protect its secrets, the reason is unknown. Its rediscovery has forced scholars to rewrite the timeline of civilization itself. Across the world, in the Pacific Ocean, lies another enigma, Nan Madol, off the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia. Known as the Venice of the Pacific, it is built on a series of artificial islets connected by canals made from colossal basalt columns. Some weigh up to 50 tons each, stacked like giant logs to form walls and platforms. Nan Madol was constructed centuries ago, but legends suggest its origins reach deeper into time. Local stories say it was built by two brothers with magical powers who flew the stones into place. Archaeologists debate how such immense blocks could have been quarried and transported across ocean channels with the technology of the day. The site feels both ancient and alien, as if belonging to a civilization whose methods have been forgotten. Odd fact, Nan Madol remains uninhabited today, shunned by locals who call it haunted. It is a city of silence, its stones covered in vines, its canals stagnant. Yet in its stillness, it stands as a monument to lost knowledge. Farther west, in the heart of the Pacific, lie the ruins of Easter Island, or Rapa Nui. The Moai statues, carved from volcanic rock, stand with solemn faces, gazing inland. Some rise more than 30 feet tall. For centuries, their creation puzzled outsiders. How could an isolated island people, with limited resources, raise and transport such colossi? Modern research has revealed ingenious methods, but the scale still feels out of proportion to the island's modest population. These anomalies extend beyond the Pacific. In South America, the high plains of Peru guard Sacsayhuaman, a fortress of immense stone walls. The blocks are cut with such precision that not even a knife blade fits between them. Some weigh over 100 tons, yet they are fitted together without mortar, locked like a puzzle. The Inca claimed they inherited the site from earlier builders, adding to its aura of mystery. Nearby, in the Nazca Desert, vast geoglyphs stretch across the ground, figures of birds, animals, and lines so straight they can only be fully seen from the sky. Their purpose remains uncertain. Ritual pathways, astronomical markers, or messages to the gods. Whatever their meaning, they remind us that ancient people thought in scales and symbols far beyond mere survival. Odd fact, beneath Lake Titicaca, divers have found ruins suggesting settlements submerged by rising waters. Some believe they are remnants of cultures older than the Inca, drowned as the climate shifted and seas rose. Across Europe, too, mysteries abound. The great stones of Stonehenge in England align with solstices, hinting at astronomical knowledge. The builders transported blue stones from Wales, over 150 miles away, with methods still debated. On Malta, the megalithic temples of Kagar Kim and Nasdra, dating back more than 5,000 years, feature alignments with the rising sun. These structures suggest that early societies understood the heavens with surprising sophistication. Taken together, these ruins form a puzzle. They appear in different times, different places, different cultures. Yet they share qualities of scale, precision, and alignment that seem out of place within the slow, gradual story of civilization's rise. Were they the products of genius communities that pushed boundaries earlier than we thought? Or are they remnants of knowledge preserved from an even older age? Survivors of catastrophe rebuilding in stone what had once been greater? Mainstream archaeology acknowledges their brilliance, but insists on continuity. Human ingenuity, they argue, needs no lost civilizations to explain it. Every anomaly is the product of local innovation, persistence, and creativity. And yet, the sheer weight of mystery leaves space for speculation. Picture Göbekli Tepe at dawn, its carved pillars casting shadows on the earth. Imagine non-metal alive with voices, its canals filled with canoes, its basalt walls gleaming in the sun. Envision Sacsayhuaman under construction, blocks dragged with unknown effort, fitted with impossible precision. Each site stands as a monument to human ambition, but also as a riddle carved in stone. The anomalous ruins remind us that history is not always neat. It contains jagged edges, sudden leaps, and lost pages. They challenge us to ask whether the timeline we hold is complete, or whether beneath the soil and seas lie chapters still hidden. And perhaps, in these stones, we see not only the rise of civilization, but echoes of worlds erased, fragments of memory, enduring in stone when all else is lost. When the sky burned and the seas rose, not all perished. Some endured. In every great disaster, there are always survivors, the scattered few who cling to life as worlds collapse around them. And it is in their memories, fragile yet enduring, that the faintest threads of a lost age may have been carried forward. Imagine a group of families fleeing as fire rained from the heavens. Their villages destroyed, their fields smoldering. They retreat to caves, forests, and high ground. For years, they live on the edge of hunger, their lives reduced to survival. Yet among them are those who remember. They tell stories around the fire, of cities now drowned, of stars that once fell, of gods who wielded thunder. These stories become myths, but beneath their poetry lies memory, the memory of survival. Across the world, cultures speak of ancestors who endured a great flood, a great fire, or a great winter. The Maya remembered cycles of destruction that ended earlier worlds. The Hopi spoke of emerging from underground caves after the fourth world was consumed. In Polynesian tales, voyagers fled sinking islands, guided by stars to new homes. These myths may not describe exact events, but they carry the essence of lived catastrophe. Odd fact: in Aboriginal Australia, oral traditions describe coastlines that existed before sea levels rose. Modern science has confirmed that some of these stories preserve accurate details of landscapes submerged more than 7,000 years ago. Oral memory, carried through countless generations, can endure longer than we once believed possible. What knowledge might survivors of a cosmic impact have carried? Perhaps fragments of astronomy, warnings about fiery stars and wandering comets. Perhaps methods of building, farming, or navigating. Perhaps only fragments of ritual, woven into song and story. What began as memory may have become myth, stripped of detail but charged with awe. Some researchers suggest that the sudden rise of monumental building in places like Göbekli Tepe could represent the survivors' attempt to preserve knowledge. The carved animals, the circular enclosures, the deliberate alignments, could these be symbols of warning, reminders of a time when the sky itself turned hostile? Elsewhere, scattered survivors might have become the culture bringers of later myths. In Greek tradition, after the flood of Deucalion, a new people arose, guided by those who remembered. In Sumerian legend, Awanis, a being who emerged from the sea, taught humanity writing, farming, and law. To mainstream historians, such figures are symbols. But could they reflect real survivors carrying fragments of knowledge into the future, appearing like teachers from another world? Odd fact, the Dogon people of Mali hold traditions about the star Sirius, including knowledge of its invisible companion, Sirius B, which modern astronomy only confirmed in the 19th century. Some argue this is coincidence or misinterpretation. Others see it as memory of an older, more advanced knowledge preserved across time. Survivors would have faced immense hardship. With infrastructure destroyed and populations scattered, knowledge could not be fully preserved. Writing, if it existed, might have been lost. Tools and techniques requiring many hands would have vanished. Yet even in collapse, people adapt. They simplify, remember what they can, and pass on what they must. In this way, civilization does not vanish entirely, but smolders, ready to reignite centuries later. Picture a lone elder teaching children beneath a starlit sky. She tells of a fire that fell from heaven, of the long winter that followed, of the need to watch the stars for signs. Her words are not recorded, but carried in memory, shaping the worldview of generations. What we read now as myth may be her voice, echoing through time. Mainstream archaeology sees myth as allegory, not record. Floods and fires, they argue, are metaphors for life struggles, not eyewitness accounts. But the persistence of such myths across continents suggests otherwise. They may not describe events literally, but they preserve the essence of survival. That humanity has faced devastation before and endured. The survivors of a cataclysm would not have thought of themselves as the inheritors of lost civilization. They would have thought only of surviving the next season, the next hunt, the next storm. Yet in their resilience, they became bridges, carrying fragments of memory from a fallen world into a new age. And when we listen to their myths today, when we trace their stories of fire, flood, and rebirth, we may be hearing the voices of those who lived through the unthinkable. Survivors who kept the flame of memory alive, even as the world they once knew lay in ruins. In the frozen wastes of Siberia, beneath layers of ice and permafrost, lie the remains of creatures that should not be there. Mammoths, perfectly preserved, their long tusks curved like crescents, their fur still intact, their flesh sometimes so fresh that wolves and dogs have fed upon it. For thousands of years, these giants lay hidden, until the thaw revealed them, time capsules from a vanished world. The mystery is not only their preservation, but the abruptness of their fate. Some mammoths have been found with food still in their mouths and undigested in their stomachs, grasses and buttercups from meadows that once stretched across what is now tundra. These animals were not starving in a dwindling world. They were alive, grazing, and then, suddenly, they were gone. How could such colossal beasts, numbering in the millions across Eurasia and North America, disappear so quickly? Mainstream explanations point to two forces: climate change and human hunting. As the Ice Age ended, habitats shifted. Forests replaced grasslands, shrinking the mammoth's range. At the same time, expanding human populations hunted them for food, fur, and bone. Together, these pressures drove them to extinction. And yet, the frozen mammoths suggest something more sudden. Some appear to have died catastrophically, flash-frozen in moments of violent upheaval. Could a sudden plunge in temperature have done this? Could a cosmic event like a meteor impact or atmospheric explosion have unleashed storms powerful enough to bury living creatures in ice? Odd fact, in 1901, a mammoth carcass discovered at Berezovka in Siberia was found with undigested plants in its mouth and stomach, suggesting it had died so quickly it had no time to chew or swallow. Scientists who examined it described the preservation as astonishingly fresh, as if nature had frozen the creature mid-meal. Other megafauna met similar fates. The woolly rhinoceros, the cave lion, the giant ground sloth, all vanished around the same period, in what scientists call the quaternary extinction event. Their loss reshaped ecosystems, leaving a world poorer in diversity. For those who lived through it, the disappearance of these giants must have seemed like the vanishing of gods. Some theories link this sudden die-off to the Younger Dryas event, the mysterious cold snap 12,800 years ago. If a comet or meteor fragmented in Earth's atmosphere, the resulting firestorms and climate shifts could have devastated habitats overnight. Dust and soot in the air may have plunged temperatures, creating conditions that flash froze the mammoths where they stood. Skeptics argue that permafrost itself is explanation enough. Animals can be trapped, buried, and preserved naturally over millennia. They caution against reading too much into a handful of dramatic finds. But the image of a mammoth frozen with flowers still on its tongue lingers, haunting and unresolved. For ancient peoples, encountering such creatures must have been extraordinary. Imagine a hunter in Siberia, thousands of years ago, stumbling upon the body of a mammoth emerging from melting ice. To him, it would not be a relic of deep time, but a sleeping giant, a messenger from another world. Myths of frozen beasts, half alive in the earth, may trace back to such encounters. Odd fact, mammoth ivory has been used for carving since prehistoric times, and even today, some communities harvest it from the thawing tundra, where new specimens still emerge each summer. The dead continue to offer their bones, long after their kind has vanished. The frozen mammoths are not just biological curiosities. They are clues, fragments of a moment when the world changed with terrifying speed. They suggest that extinction need not be slow, that climates can shift abruptly, that life can be snatched away mid-breath. And in their silent forms, preserved in ice, they remind us that the earth holds memories we have yet to fully decipher. Were they victims of gradual change, hunted to death by human hands? Or were they caught in a sudden catastrophe, an echo of fire and cold from the sky? We may never know with certainty. But as long as mammoths emerge from the ice, their riddle remains unsolved, a frozen question from a lost world, staring back at us with ancient eyes. When ancient texts describe the heavens aflame, when they speak of thunderbolts that leveled cities or fire that fell from the gods, how should we understand them? Were they poetic metaphors for storms and volcanoes? Were they distorted memories of cosmic catastrophe, meteors and comets striking the earth? Or, as some fringe thinkers suggest, could they be descriptions of technologies so advanced they blurred the line between natural disaster and deliberate weapon? The myths are vivid. In the Sanskrit epics of India, the Mahabharata speaks of a weapon like a blazing arrow that consumed armies with fire, turning sand into glass. In Mesopotamia, tales of gods like Ninurta wield celestial stones and storms as weapons. In the Hebrew Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah comes with fire from the sky, leaving the cities in ash. Again and again, stories of devastation mingle with imagery of the heavens. Mainstream historians interpret these as allegory or as mythologized retellings of natural disasters, volcanic eruptions, lightning storms, or earthquakes. But to those who search for deeper meaning, the imagery feels uncomfortably specific. Could a culture witnessing the fiery explosion of a meteor mistake it for the wrath of a god? Could a cosmic impact, sudden and violent, become the prototype for every myth of divine punishment? Odd fact, the Tunguska explosion of 1908 flattened over 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest. Witnesses described a fireball brighter than the sun, shockwaves that shattered windows hundreds of miles away, and a sound like the sky splitting open. If such an event had occurred 10,000 years ago, without scientific language to explain it, would survivors not have called it a weapon of the gods? Fringe theorists take this further. They ask, what if the ancients were not merely misinterpreting natural chaos, but remembering real weapons, tools of advanced technology lost to time? They point to vitrified hill forts in Europe, where stone walls appear melted as if exposed to searing heat. They cite the desert glass of Libya, imagining it as fallout of forgotten wars. They return to the Sanskrit epics, suggesting that tales of divine chariots and weapons of light preserve fragments of a technological past. To mainstream science, these claims remain speculation. There is no solid evidence of vanished machines, no ruins of factories, no fossilized engines in the strata of the earth. And yet, the allure of the idea persists, because the boundary between natural disaster and technological force is so thin when viewed through myth. Imagine survivors of a meteor impact, centuries later retelling the story. They describe the light, the heat, the destruction. Their children's children shape the story into one of God's hurling fire. The story grows in power, echoing through generations, until it becomes inseparable from religion itself. At what point does a memory of chaos become a myth of weapons? Odd fact, in ancient China, records describe fire from heaven striking armies, killing thousands. Historians debate whether this referred to lightning, meteors, or metaphor, but the language echoes the same imagery found across continents: destruction that arrives not from Earth, but from above. The question remains unresolved. Were these accounts memories of natural cataclysms, meteors exploding in the atmosphere, comets blazing across the sky, or were they something else entirely, an echo of technologies that existed before recorded history? Perhaps the truth lies in the space between. To the ancients, a meteor impact would have looked indistinguishable from a weapon wielded by gods. The roar, the fire, the devastation. What human hand could separate the natural from the divine? In the end, whether cosmic weapons or natural chaos, the stories tell us something vital. Humanity has always lived under the sky's shadow, aware that destruction can fall at any moment. The myths preserve this fear, wrapped in the language of gods and battles, carried forward so we might remember. And so, the ancient tales remain with us, not proof of lost machines, nor simple metaphor, but reminders of the blurred line between memory and myth, between the fire of heaven and the fire of imagination. Beneath the world's oceans, and under the frozen shields of ice, lie secrets that have yet to be uncovered. If civilizations once flourished before the upheavals of the Ice Age, much of their memory may now rest hidden, drowned by rising seas, or entombed beneath glaciers that have stood for thousands of years. When the last great ice age ended, sea levels rose by more than 100 meters. Entire coastlines were swallowed, transforming fertile plains into seabeds. Places where early peoples may have built villages, harbors, or even cities now lie far below the waves, beyond the reach of ordinary archaeology. What we call the shore today was once inland. What is ocean today was once land. If there were ruins, they would be there still, preserved in silence, veiled by water. In India, off the coast of Gujarat, divers have explored the waters near modern Dwarka. Submerged structures lie on the seabed, aligned in patterns that suggest walls, streets, and foundations. Some believe these are remnants of an ancient port city, mentioned in Hindu texts, said to have been swallowed by the sea. Radiocarbon dating of artifacts suggests human activity there thousands of years ago, far earlier than expected. Far to the east, near Japan's Ryukyu Islands, another enigma lies beneath the waves. The Yonaguni Monument, discovered in 1986, is a massive stone formation on the ocean floor. Its terraces, steps, and sharp angles resemble a carved pyramid or platform, leading some to argue it is the remnant of a prehistoric city. Skeptics insist it is natural, a quirk of geology shaped by currents and tectonics. Yet divers who swim through its passageways cannot help but feel they are gliding across the ruins of something deliberately built, now claimed by the sea. Odd fact, some divers at Yonaguni claim to see carvings, faint outlines of animals, and symbols etched into the stone. If true, these would strengthen the case for human hands, though debate remains fierce. The monument hovers between categories: natural wonder or evidence of a chapter of history erased by the ocean. And then there is Antarctica. Beneath its vast white deserts lies land once green, once free of ice. Millions of years ago, forests thrived there. But even in more recent millennia, maps like the controversial Piri-Reis chart from the 16th century appear to show parts of Antarctica's coastline free of ice, as if drawn from older, now lost sources. Could memories of an ice-free Antarctica, passed down through forgotten civilizations, have reached early mapmakers? Modern science has revealed lakes and mountain ranges hidden beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. Radar has mapped valleys and rivers entombed under kilometers of frozen weight. If human settlement ever existed there in warmer times, it would now be sealed away in perfect preservation, awaiting discovery when the ice finally yields. Greenland, too, hides secrets under its ice cap. Studies using ice cores and radar imaging have revealed evidence of ancient river systems and potential impact craters. In 2018, scientists announced the discovery of a massive crater beneath Hiawatha Glacier, possibly formed by a meteor in the late Ice Age. If confirmed, it would tie directly into the timeline of global upheaval and suggest that Greenland's ice hides far more than we yet imagine. The oceans themselves are filled with whispers of lost worlds. Legends tell of continents that sank beneath the waves: Atlantis in the Atlantic, Lemuria in the Indian Ocean, Mu in the Pacific. To science, these are myths, allegories from memory of floods and shifting seas. Yet archaeology continues to find traces of human presence on submerged landscapes. Off the coast of Britain, beneath the North Sea, lies Doggerland, a once fertile plain that connected England to Europe, now drowned. Stone tools, bones, and hearths have been dredged from its floor, proving that human life once thrived where only waves roll today. If Doggerland, Dwarka, Yonaguni, and others are evidence of drowned worlds, then perhaps the myths are not mere fantasy, but echoes of memory. 1,000 cultures speak of floods that ended worlds, of lands lost to the sea. Science and story may be converging in the silent depths. Picture the ocean floor. A diver's light sweeps across a row of squared stones, a stairway descending into shadow. Fish scatter through open doorways. Coral grows across what might have once been a wall. There is no sound but the hiss of breath through a mask. In that silence, it is easy to imagine an ancient city below, alive again with voices, markets, and music, until the sea reclaimed it forever. Odd fact, off the coast of Cuba in 2001, sonar scans revealed geometric structures deep underwater, arranged like streets and plazas. The site lies too deep to have been above sea level in known human history. The discovery remains controversial, but it fuels speculation that entire chapters of the human story may lie beyond the reach of conventional archaeology. The mainstream view is cautious. Most submerged structures can be explained by geology, coincidence, or natural formations. And yet, the sheer scale of what remains undiscovered beneath oceans and ice leaves questions open. 90% of the sea floor remains uncharted in detail. Antarctica and Greenland conceal worlds beneath their frozen shells. What lies there could alter history as we know it. In the end, the sea keeps its secrets. Ice preserves them in silence. And we, standing on the shifting edge of land and water, can only imagine what waits below. Lost harbors, drowned temples, forgotten cities, preserved for an age when discovery will come. Until then, the myths remain our guide. Stories of lands swallowed by water, of kingdoms lost beneath the ice. And perhaps one day, those myths will be revealed not as legends, but as memories of a world we have yet to rediscover. Long before telescopes, long before written charts, humanity lifted its eyes to the night sky. The stars were not distant suns to them, but living guides, woven into story, ritual, and survival. Across the world, Ancient cultures tracked the heavens with astonishing precision, building monuments aligned with constellations, recording cycles that stretched across centuries. To them, the sky was both a calendar and a memory, a map of the present and perhaps a warning from the past. The constellation of Orion appears again and again in the ancient record. In Egypt, the three pyramids of Giza are aligned with the stars of Orion's belt. To the Maya, Orion was a place of creation, a cosmic hearth. In Greek mythology, Orion was the mighty hunter, striding across the heavens. But beneath the mythology, the pattern remains. A constellation treated as sacred, as if marking something more than myth. Some researchers suggest that Orion's prominence reflects memory of a cataclysm. If a meteor shower or comet strike once came from the region of Orion, ancient skywatchers may have preserved its importance in stone. To later generations, the original warning blurred into story, but the alignment remained, an architectural reminder to keep watch on the hunter's stars. The Pleiades, the cluster known as the Seven Sisters, appear in traditions as diverse as Greece, Japan, and Australia. To the Greeks, they were pursued by Orion. To the Japanese, they are Subaru, still depicted today as a cluster of stars. Aboriginal Australians describe them as young women chased across the sky. Why would so many cultures, separated by oceans and time, focus on the same faint cluster? Odd fact, the Pleiades are one of the few star clusters visible to the naked eye. But in many traditions, there is a story of a lost sister, one star that is no longer seen. Astronomers suggest this reflects the fading brightness of one star over millennia, remembered in myth. Yet some see it as evidence of astonishing long-term sky watching, or as symbolic of something once observed, later obscured. In the Americas, the Hopi built their villages in patterns that mirror Orion. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the massive Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon align with celestial cycles, while the Avenue of the Dead points to the Pleiades setting on the horizon. Such alignments suggest that architecture was more than functional. It was a way of embedding the sky into the earth, of ensuring that memory could not be lost. Mainstream archaeology sees these as expressions of ritual and agriculture. The rising of Orion or the Pleiades marked planting seasons, migrations, or ceremonies. But an alternative view asks, what if these alignments also served as warnings? What if certain stars were remembered not for their beauty, but for the destruction that once came from their direction? Imagine a sky lit not only by stars, but by fire. A comet breaks apart, streaking across Orion, its fragments raining toward Earth. To the people who witnessed it, the constellation becomes forever charged with meaning. They align their temples, carve their stones, and tell their stories so their descendants will never forget where the danger came from. Odd fact, ancient Mesopotamian texts describe the 7 gods of destiny linked with the Pleiades, said to bring both blessing and destruction. Some scholars see this as symbolic. Others wonder if it reflects memory of celestial events, meteor showers radiating from the cluster. Astronomy of the ancients was not only practical, but deeply symbolic. The sky was a canvas on which memory could be painted. And in that canvas, alignments with Orion, the Pleiades, and other constellations may be more than coincidence. They may be the last traces of an ancient instruction. Remember the sky, for it remembers us. Today, archaeologists and astronomers study these alignments with tools and theories, but the essence remains the same. We still gaze upward, still search for meaning in the stars, still wonder what they may foretell. The ancients may not have known the physics of meteors or the structure of galaxies, but they knew the power of the heavens. They encoded that power into stone, so the memory would outlast even catastrophe. Perhaps then, the astronomy of the ancients was less about worship and more about survival. A sky map, etched in myth and monument, guiding us not only through the seasons, but through the cycles of destruction and renewal, written in the heavens themselves. Imagine the morning after. A fireball has long since burned out, the roar has faded, and the world waits in uneasy silence. The sky, once brilliant with stars, is no longer blue, but an endless shroud of gray. Dust, soot, and ash, thrown high into the atmosphere, blot out the sun. Days turn dim. Nights are darker still. This is not merely the aftermath of a single explosion, but the beginning of years of shadow. Volcanic eruptions can teach us something of this feeling. When Mount Tambora erupted in 1815, it filled the atmosphere with so much ash that 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Crops failed across Europe and North America. Famine followed. But what a single volcano accomplished in 1 year, a cosmic impact could multiply 100-fold. The black sky years would have begun suddenly. Firestorms ignited by falling fragments would have sent smoke into the stratosphere. Forests, grasslands, even entire regions might have burned. The dust of shattered stone, the vapor of the meteor itself, and the soot of charred earth rose together, creating a planetary veil. For survivors, the change would have been swift and terrifying. Imagine hunters emerging from caves to find the sun dimmed, the horizon hazed, the seasons broken. Summer heat would falter, crops would wither, rivers would freeze too early. A new, unnatural winter would descend upon the earth. Odd fact: tree rings around the world record sudden drops in growth during the Younger Dryas, suggesting a dramatic decline in sunlight. These frozen records of wood tell the story of skies darkened, seasons shortened, and life strained to its limits. Famine would spread quickly. Communities dependent on seasonal harvests would find their fields barren. Herds of grazing animals, unable to find pasture, would collapse. Hunters, who once relied on predictable migrations, would discover empty plains. In the chaos, survival would hinge on adaptation, scavenging, fishing, or retreating to more sheltered lands. The human experience of these years would have been one of confusion and fear. The rhythm of the heavens, so carefully watched for millennia, had been broken. The sun no longer rose with its former strength. The moon was dim behind the veil. Stars, once brilliant guides, flickered faintly, if at all. For a people who measured time and faith by the sky, the heavens themselves had gone silent. Myths from around the world echo this silence. Norse legends tell of Fimbul winter, 3 endless winters that preceded the end of the world. The Popol Vuh of the Maya describes a time when the earth was plunged into darkness and the sky collapsed. In China, stories speak of suns hidden in chaos descending upon the land. Though separated by continents, the theme is shared: a broken sky, a world without light. Odd fact: modern studies suggest that even a small reduction in sunlight, as little as 10 to 20%, can disrupt global agriculture catastrophically. A cosmic veil of soot could have reduced light far more severely, triggering not just hardship, but collapse. The psychological toll would have been immense. Fire had fallen from the heavens, and now the sun itself seemed punished. For survivors, the world would have felt cursed. Rituals may have emerged to bring back the light, offerings, prayers, even sacrifices to appease an angry sky. Religion, already rooted in the mysteries of nature, may have taken its deepest form in response to catastrophe. Meanwhile, ecosystems collapsed. Rivers froze where they once flowed. Plants failed to bloom. Insects vanished. With them, birds disappeared, and with the birds, the larger predators starved. The chain of life, normally resilient, was stretched to breaking. Those who lived through this time would have seen a world stripped bare, silence falling, even on once living forests. The black sky years may have lasted decades, perhaps centuries in places. Slowly, sunlight would have returned, but by then, the world had changed. Ice sheets grew again. Species vanished forever. Human survivors emerged from caves and shelters into landscapes transformed, Seas higher, forests gone, animals extinct. For them, the memory of the darkened sky became legend, warning, and myth. Odd fact: scientists studying Greenland's ice cores find layers of soot and dust dating to the Younger Dryas onset, evidence that the air itself was once choked. These microscopic grains are the fingerprints of a disaster written into the frozen archives of time. To stand in that world would have been to live in perpetual twilight, a dim existence where every breath carried the weight of ash. Yet humanity endured. In the silence of the black sky years, people adapted, told stories, kept fires burning. And from that endurance, civilization would one day rise again. The skies cleared, the sun returned, but memory remained. To later generations, the darkness became myth, a punishment by gods, a war in the heavens, a cycle of death and rebirth. And perhaps that was the greatest legacy of the black sky years. Not only the scars they left on the earth, but the imprint they left on the human soul. Before the written word, before ink on parchment or symbols carved in stone, there were stories. Around the firelight, beneath the open sky, people spoke the memory of the world. Parents told children, elders guided the young, and voices carried the past forward. For tens of thousands of years, oral tradition was the human archive, fragile yet enduring. Across continents, these stories preserve not just myth, but memory. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal elders tell of a time when fire fell from the heavens. Their Dreamtime stories speak of a sky that burned, of the land reshaped by flames, of water rushing in to claim new ground. Modern researchers have traced some of these tales to real geological events: meteor impacts, sea level rise, volcanic eruptions. The remarkable continuity of Aboriginal oral tradition, maintained over 40,000 years, may be the longest unbroken chain of cultural memory in the world. Odd fact: Aboriginal stories describe the formation of craters like Wolf Creek long before geologists studied them. To the storytellers, these were not abstract impacts, but living events woven into myth so they would never be forgotten. In North America, the Hopi, Zuni, and Navajo tell of worlds destroyed before the present one. Some speak of fire raining from the sky, others of floods that swept away entire peoples. In the Great Lakes region, Ojibwe stories describe a long-tailed star that fell to earth, bringing fire and death. Archaeologists note that the timing of these stories aligns with evidence of the Tunguska-like airburst events and the Younger Dryas period. The memory of cosmic fire may have been carried through generations, crystallized into myth. Far across the oceans, in Polynesia, islanders recall floods that swallowed entire lands. On the island of Tuvalu, oral history speaks of ancestors forced to flee as the sea rose higher each year. In Hawaii, chants tell of Pele, the goddess of fire, reshaping the land with flame and ash, perhaps an echo of volcanic eruptions. These are not just creation myths, but survival narratives, warnings embedded in song and story. What makes oral tradition extraordinary is its resilience. While details shift, metaphors evolve, imagery adapts, the core memory endures. Fire from the sky, darkness across the land, water rising where there was once earth. To modern ears, they sound like myth. To ancient communities, they were living history, encoded in a language of story to outlast generations. Odd fact: scientists studying Aboriginal flood stories in Australia have dated them to more than 7,000 years ago, corresponding with post-ice age sea level rise. These tales describe coastlines that no longer exist, proving that oral memory can outlast millennia. Some traditions preserve astonishing detail. In the Pacific Northwest, Native American groups tell of a great shaking of the earth, followed by waves that swallowed villages. For years, scholars dismissed these as myth. Then, in the late 20th century, geologists confirmed a massive earthquake and tsunami struck the region in 1700 CE, precisely matching the oral accounts. The stories were not exaggeration, they were history. If such accuracy can persist for centuries, even millennia, then perhaps myths of fire and flood are not mere allegory, but echoes of real cataclysms witnessed in prehistory. Could the story of Ragnarok, the Norse twilight of the gods, be a memory of volcanic winter? Could the Polynesian chants of drowned islands be recollections of Ice Age floods? Could the tales of cosmic fire in the Americas be memories of the Younger Dryas impact? To the ancient storyteller, the goal was not entertainment, it was survival. A warning passed on through myth was a safeguard for descendants. Remember where the fire fell. Remember the waters that rose. Remember the mountain that shook. By wrapping memory in story, cultures ensured it would not be forgotten when the cycle came again. Today, archaeologists, linguists, and anthropologists are learning to treat oral traditions not only as myth, but as historical data. The voices of the past carry truths that science is only now beginning to confirm. Perhaps the greatest irony is that our own modern civilization, so dependent on written records, may prove less enduring. Paper decays, digital data fades, libraries burn. But a story told in rhythm and song, passed from parent to child, can last longer than empires. In this way, oral tradition is more than memory. It is a time capsule, fragile, yes, but astonishingly resilient. A message from the past, reminding us that the world has ended before and may again. In the quiet layers of ice and soil, Earth keeps its memories. Tiny particles, frozen for millennia, whisper of firestorms and sudden chills. Around 12,800 years ago, something extraordinary happened. The planet, just beginning to warm after an age of ice, plunged back into cold. Glaciers returned, megafauna vanished, and human societies staggered. Scientists call this the Younger Dryas, a climatic whiplash that reshaped history. But what caused it? For decades, the prevailing explanation was the disruption of ocean currents, perhaps triggered by melting ice sheets spilling fresh water into the North Atlantic. But in recent years, a bold and controversial hypothesis has emerged that the Younger Dryas began with a cosmic impact, a comet or fragments of a disintegrating celestial body striking the Earth. If true, it would mean humanity's story was forever altered by a disaster from the sky. The evidence begins with the so-called black mats, layers of darkened soil found across North America and beyond. These layers, dated to the onset of the Younger Dryas, contain unusual clues: microscopic spherules formed by extreme heat, nanodiamonds created under sudden pressure, and elevated levels of platinum, a metal rare on Earth but common in meteorites. To some researchers, these markers are fingerprints of a cosmic event, the debris of a world struck by fire from above. Odd fact: in Greenland, an ice core extracted from nearly 2 miles beneath the surface revealed a sudden spike in platinum around 12,800 years ago. The timing matches the Younger Dryas onset precisely, fueling the argument for something extraterrestrial. Supporters of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis believe that a large comet, perhaps broken into fragments, struck the northern hemisphere. The impacts would have ignited massive wildfires, sending soot into the atmosphere, darkening skies, and triggering a rapid cooling. Such an event could also explain the sudden extinction of mammoths, mastodons, and other megafauna, as well as the decline of early human cultures like the Clovis people of North America. But the hypothesis is not without critics. Many geologists argue that the evidence is inconsistent. Nanodiamonds and spherules, they say, can form in multiple ways, including wildfires and volcanic eruptions. The black mats might reflect gradual environmental changes, not a single catastrophic impact. The platinum spike, though intriguing, could have other explanations. To skeptics, the comet theory is too dramatic, a cosmic solution to problems that might have more terrestrial causes. The debate has been fierce. Proponents argue that the sheer number of anomalies, platinum, spherules, nanodiamonds, soot, is too great to dismiss as coincidence. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and no definitive crater has been found that dates precisely to 12,800 years ago. Odd fact: in 2018, scientists announced the discovery of a massive impact crater beneath the Hiawatha Glacier in Greenland. Over 30 kilometers wide, it was formed by a meteor striking ice and rock. Its age has not yet been pinned exactly, but some suggest it could align with the Younger Dryas onset. If confirmed, it would be the smoking gun of the hypothesis. For now, it remains tantalizing but uncertain. Beyond the hard science lies a deeper question. If a comet did shatter in Earth's skies 12,800 years ago, the consequences would have been global. Fires across continents, skies blackened for years, crops and ecosystems collapsing, human survivors scattered, clinging to life in a world transformed. Such an event would not merely alter climate, it would leave scars in memory. Perhaps those scars live on in myth, in stories of fire from the sky, of gods hurling weapons, of floods that followed flame. Mainstream science remains cautious. Most researchers lean toward explanations rooted in Earth's own systems: shifting currents, melting glaciers, volcanic activity. Yet the impact hypothesis refuses to vanish. Each new piece of evidence, each anomalous layer in the soil or ice, reopens the question. For the general imagination, the comet theory carries weight because it fits both evidence and instinct. Humanity has seen the sky blaze, at Tunguska in 1908, at Chelyabinsk in 2013. We know that asteroids have struck before, most famously 66 million years ago, ending the reign of dinosaurs. The possibility that a smaller but devastating impact shaped our own prehistory feels both plausible and haunting. Odd fact: astronomers estimate that Earth is struck by a city-destroying asteroid every few thousand years, and by a civilization ending one every few million. Statistically, the idea of an impact in human prehistory is not far-fetched at all. Whether or not the Younger Dryas was born of cosmic fire, the hypothesis has changed the way we view our past. It reminds us that the Earth is not a closed system, sealed from the stars, but part of a larger cosmic theater where impacts, comets, and fragments of ice and rock can change the story in an instant. Perhaps the comet did come, its fragments blazing across the northern skies, igniting forests, plunging humanity into darkness. Or perhaps the truth lies in the slower, subtler rhythms of ocean and ice. Either way, the Younger Dryas stands as a reminder of fragility, of how quickly the climate can shift, how suddenly worlds can vanish. And as we look up into the night sky, the question remains: was it the comet that almost ended us? Or is the real mystery that we are here at all, survivors of a planet forever vulnerable to the fire above? Across the deserts of Egypt, the jungles of Central America, and the misty plains of Asia, stone giants rise. Pyramids, megaliths, and colossal structures stand as if immune to time, their edges softened but not erased by centuries of wind and weather. To mainstream history, they are triumphs of early civilizations, achievements of ingenuity and labor. Yet to some, they are far older, the fingerprints of a culture that existed before the ice melted, before the sky fell. The pyramids of Giza remain the most famous of these enigmas. Their alignment with Orion's belt has sparked endless debate, but beyond the astronomy lies another mystery. How did a Bronze Age society, with limited tools, raise millions of limestone blocks with such precision? Mainstream explanations speak of ramps, labor, and perseverance. Alternative theories whisper of inheritance, knowledge passed down from an earlier people who survived catastrophe. In the Americas, the pyramids of Teotihuacan stretch across the valley like echoes of Egypt, their massive platforms aligned with celestial cycles. In South America, The site of Tiwanaku in Bolivia presents stones weighing hundreds of tons, cut with an accuracy that defies easy explanation. At Pumapunku, blocks are carved with interlocking shapes like pieces of a giant machine. To some, these are the hallmarks of a lost engineering tradition, survivors rebuilding after fire from the sky. Odd fact, in Indonesia, on the island of Java, lies Gunung Padang, a terraced hill long thought to be natural. Recent studies suggest it may conceal a pyramid older than 20,000 years, buried beneath layers of volcanic rock and soil. If true, it would rewrite the timeline of human architecture, placing complex construction deep in the Ice Age when humanity was supposedly still nomadic. What ties these monuments together is not only their scale, but their defiance of chronology. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built around 9,600 BCE, appears suddenly, without precedent, massive stone circles erected by a culture that had not yet developed cities or agriculture, according to the conventional timeline. It emerged just as the Younger Dryas ended, as if survivors of a lost world brought their knowledge to bear in the ruins of catastrophe. Speculation grows when these structures are paired with myths. Egyptian priests told Solon that their knowledge came from a time before the flood, preserved by the first-time gods. In Mesoamerica, the Maya and Aztec claimed their pyramids echoed earlier creations, gifts from divine ancestors. In India, texts speak of cities built in forgotten ages, long before history's accepted dawn. The myths do not present invention, but remembrance. Could it be that pyramids and megaliths were not the beginning of civilization, but the fragments of something already ancient? Survivors of a meteor strike, scattered across continents, carrying fragments of geometry, astronomy, and engineering, knowledge too precious to lose, too important not to rebuild? Odd fact, many pyramids and megalithic sites share an uncanny focus on the stars. Giza with Orion, Teotihuacan with the Pleiades, Nabta Playa in the Sahara with solstices and equinoxes. Were these alignments simply ritual, or were they warnings? A way of marking the heavens, telling future generations. This is where the danger came from? Mainstream archaeology holds fast to its chronology. Civilizations rise gradually, from stone tools to cities, from agriculture to writing. But anomalies remain, stones too heavy, alignments too precise, myths too persistent. The gaps invite speculation, and within those gaps, a picture emerges of an Ice Age world that knew more than we allow, destroyed by fire from above, leaving behind only stone as testimony. Imagine it, survivors gathering on a warming plain, remembering the firestorms and the blackened sky. With their old world gone, they set to work building monuments of permanence, embedding memory in stone. To the generations that followed, the purpose was lost. The myths became allegories, the alignments sacred. But the stones remained, mute witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human history. Whether the pyramids were truly built by survivors of a pre-meteor civilization may never be known. But their endurance, their mystery, and their defiance of explanation keep the question alive. Stone, after all, is the one voice that survives fire, flood, and ice. It may not speak plainly, but it speaks across ages. Perhaps that is the greatest riddle of all, not how the pyramids were built, but why they were built. Were they monuments to gods? Or monuments to survival, reminders of a world that ended, and a warning to the one that rose in its place? Since the first humans looked upward, the night sky has been a place of wonder and of dread. The stars gave order to time, guiding migrations, planting seasons, and ceremonies. But every so often, the heavens betrayed that order. A sudden streak of fire across the dark. A star that moved, flamed, and then vanished. A thunderous roar as stones fell from the sky. To ancient peoples, these were not accidents of nature, but messages from the divine. Warnings, punishments, omens. Meteors inspired awe because they were unpredictable. The sun rose with constancy, the moon cycled faithfully, but fire falling from the heavens came without pattern. In Mesopotamia, court astrologers tracked the sky obsessively, fearing that a single comet might foretell the death of kings or the fall of empires. In China, records of guest stars stretch back thousands of years, each one interpreted as a sign of cosmic displeasure. Odd fact: the fall of the Western Zhou dynasty in China, around 1059 BCE, was linked in chronicles to the appearance of a blazing comet. To the people of the time, the dynasty's collapse was written not only on Earth, but in the sky. In Greece, meteors were seen as weapons of the gods. Zeus hurled thunderbolts to punish mortals, and stories of Phaethon, who lost control of the sun chariot and scorched the earth, echo the chaos of falling fire. The gods of Olympus were not distant abstractions. They were projections of forces once witnessed with terror. Among the Norse, Ragnarok began with fire in the heavens. Surtur, the fire giant, marched with a flaming sword that burned the world. To people living in the cold north, fire from the sky was not only destruction, but inversion, a betrayal of the frozen order. In the Americas, cultures from the Aztec to the Pawnee treated meteors with reverence and fear. The Aztec word for comet, Citlalin-Popaca, meant smoking star. Priests interpreted their appearance as signals that sacrifices must be made to appease the gods. Among the Pawnee, meteors were spirit messengers, and their sudden appearance in the sky was greeted with rituals of protection. Odd fact: the Inca worshipped a meteorite known as the Stone of Viracocha. When it fell, it was enshrined and treated as a living piece of the heavens, a fragment of divine power that had crashed into the human world. Religions across the world often carry echoes of meteoric fear. In the Hebrew Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is described as fire raining from heaven, a city consumed by cosmic judgment. In Hindu texts, the god Shiva wields weapons of fire that burn entire armies. In Polynesia, chants tell of flaming stars that punish chiefs and reshape the islands. Whether myth or memory, the common thread is clear. Fire in the sky was not natural, but supernatural, a force of will rather than chance. This cultural memory of fear shaped ritual. Sacrifices, prayers, and festivals often coincided with the appearance of comets or meteors. To pacify the unpredictable heavens, people offered what they held most precious: crops, animals, even human lives. The belief was simple but profound. Disaster came when the gods were angered, and the gods spoke through fire in the night. Modern astronomy explains meteors as dust and stone burning in the atmosphere, comets as icy wanderers in long orbits. Yet the ancient perception lingers. Even today, headlines speak of killer asteroids and doomsday comets. The language of fear has never left us. It has only shifted into scientific terms. Perhaps the reason meteors inspired such dread is that they break the illusion of permanence. Mountains seem eternal, rivers endure, but when the sky itself rains fire, nothing feels safe. For cultures who survived catastrophe, whether volcanic eruption, airburst, or cosmic strike, that lesson was seared into memory. The gods were wrathful because the heavens themselves were dangerous. The cultural memory of fire in the sky still echoes in our myths, our religions, and even our superstitions. It is a memory that may reach back not just centuries, but millennia, perhaps to the night when a comet shattered and fell, darkening the world, ending one age and beginning another. And so, each time a shooting star arcs across the horizon, we see beauty. But somewhere deep in our collective memory, there is also unease, a whisper from our ancestors reminding us that once the stars fell as fire, and the world was never the same again. Civilization, as we know it, feels like the pinnacle of human achievement. Skyscrapers rise into the clouds, satellites orbit overhead, and networks span the globe. We are taught to believe this is the first time humanity has reached such heights. Yet beneath the surface of accepted history lies a haunting possibility. What if we are not the first, but the second? What if our inventions are rediscoveries, fragments of knowledge carried from a world that came before? The mainstream timeline begins with agriculture, around 10,000 BCE, followed by villages, cities, writing, and states. But anomalies whisper another story. Sites like Göbekli Tepe appear fully formed, with monumental stone pillars arranged in circles, at a time when humans were supposedly still nomadic. The sophistication of the site suggests knowledge inherited, not invented from scratch. It feels less like a beginning than a continuation. Imagine survivors of a cosmic catastrophe, scattered, broken, but determined. Their old world in ruins, their memories of fire and darkness preserved in story. Slowly, they rebuild. They plant crops not because they invent farming, but because they remember it. They raise monuments not because they discover stoneworking, but because they cling to skills passed down. Civilization rises again, but as a rebirth, not a birth. Odd fact, myths from around the world often speak of a first age destroyed by catastrophe. The Maya describe successive worlds, each ending in fire or flood. The Greeks told of the Golden Age and the Silver Age, swept away before the present Iron Age. Hindu cosmology describes endless cycles of creation and destruction, civilizations rising and falling like waves on an eternal sea. What if these myths are not metaphors, but memories? Artifacts out of place in time add fuel to this speculation. Ancient maps, like the Piri-Reis chart of 1513, depict coastlines of Antarctica as though ice-free, a state not seen for thousands of years. Megalithic sites show precise alignments with stars as they appeared 12,000 years ago, as though builders remembered skies before the catastrophe. These fragments hint at continuity, knowledge that should not exist unless it was carried through collapse. Some researchers suggest that the story of Prometheus, the titan who gave fire to humanity, is an allegory for survivors passing on lost knowledge. Fire, agriculture, astronomy, architecture, gifts from those who remembered. To later generations, these survivors may have seemed like gods, their preserved skills magical compared to the struggles of ordinary tribes. Over time, memory blurred into myth, but the knowledge endured. Skeptics counter that human innovation is resilient. Farming, writing, and architecture could have been discovered independently, shaped by necessity. Yet the clustering of myths, the sudden appearance of advanced sites, and the global echoes of catastrophe press the question: did humanity truly invent civilization once, or did we inherit its ashes from those who came before? Odd fact, scientists studying population genetics note a bottleneck in human history around the end of the Ice Age. Humanity may have been reduced to small, scattered groups, only to rebound in the millennia that followed. If so, it mirrors the pattern of survivors, remnants of a greater world rebuilding anew. This perspective shifts how we see our own achievements. Writing may not be an invention of Mesopotamia alone, but a rediscovery of symbols once etched on forgotten surfaces. Astronomy may not have begun with Babylonian skywatchers, but with a memory of stars that burned brighter in a darker age. Even the wheel may have been more of a remembering than a creation. If true, then our history is not a straight line, but a cycle. Civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, each inheriting whispers from the last. We may be walking paths once trodden, marveling at our progress, while unaware that we are echoes of a forgotten world. The haunting implication is this: if we are the second civilization, what became of the first? Did they rise as high as we have? Did they build machines, cities, and knowledge now lost beneath the sea or buried under ice? Or were they only slightly ahead, their fragile gains erased by fire from the sky? The truth remains buried in stone, myth, and memory. Yet there is wonder in this possibility. It connects us across time, linking our skyscrapers with the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, our satellites with the alignments of ancient pyramids. We are part of a larger story, not the first chapter, but perhaps only the latest. And if civilizations rise in cycles, then the question is not whether we are unique, but whether we will endure. The survivors of the last cataclysm gave us fragments of their world. What fragments will we leave, should the sky fall again? In the stillness of night, beneath the hum of satellites and the glow of city lights, the heavens remain watchful. The same stars that shone upon mammoth hunters, pyramid builders, and storytellers of fire still gaze down upon us. Yet we, in our modern certainty, often forget what they knew well, that the sky can change in an instant, that fire can fall without warning, that civilizations are fragile. Today, humanity stands taller than ever. Our cities sprawl with millions, our technologies connect continents, our machines orbit the planet itself. We track comets with telescopes, monitor asteroids with radar, and launch probes into the solar system. Unlike our ancestors, we can see threats before they arrive. Yet, in a strange way, we are also more vulnerable. Consider how our world depends on invisible threads: power grids, supply chains, satellites, data networks. A single disruption can ripple across continents. A solar flare, a cyber attack, or an asteroid airburst above a major city could plunge millions into darkness. Food distribution, communication, healthcare, even water, all rest on fragile systems. Our strength is also our weakness. Odd fact, in 2013, a meteor the size of a house exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia. The blast shattered windows across 6 cities, injuring more than 1,000 people. It came without warning. Had it been slightly larger, or had its trajectory aimed at the ground, the devastation would have rivaled a nuclear strike. That was only a fragment, a reminder of what lurks above. Astronomers estimate that thousands of near-Earth objects remain untracked, some large enough to destroy cities or even entire nations. Efforts are underway to map them, to design deflection systems, to prepare for impact. Yet the scale of the sky is immense, and our watchtowers, though powerful, are incomplete. Imagine the unthinkable: a meteor the size of a stadium streaking through the atmosphere, striking an ocean, sending tsunamis across coastlines. Or worse, a kilometer-wide body colliding with land, igniting forests, sending dust into the stratosphere, blotting out the sun. Crops fail, power grids collapse, panic spreads. In weeks, modern civilization could unravel, just as fragile as the Clovis hunters who once faced the Younger Dryas. What separates us from them is not invincibility, but memory. We have seen the fossils, read the myths, studied the craters. We know this has happened before. Yet knowledge alone is not protection. The same arrogance that convinces us we are the first civilization might blind us to the possibility of becoming the last. Odd fact, in 2022, NASA's DART mission successfully nudged a small asteroid from its orbit, the first time humanity has ever altered the course of a celestial body. It was a triumph of science, a proof of concept. But it also underscored a sobering truth. We are only now, after thousands of years, beginning to grasp the scale of the danger. If fire from the sky returned tomorrow, would we fare better? Perhaps we have global communication, scientific foresight, and the seeds of planetary defense. But our civilization is also precariously interlinked. A single blow could unravel it. And unlike the ancient survivors who lived close to the land, most of us are distanced from the basics of survival. We may have greater tools, but fewer instincts. The mirror of tomorrow reflects both hope and vulnerability. Hope, because we have knowledge, science, and the ability to prepare. Vulnerability, because history whispers that no civilization is permanent. Fire has fallen before, and it will fall again. The question is not whether we are capable of facing it, but whether we are willing. Whether we will learn from the long memory of stone, from the myths of fire and flood, from the craters carved deep into Earth's skin. Whether we will see ourselves not as the first civilization, nor the last, but as one chapter in a story written in both stars and ashes. And as we look to the future, one truth remains. The sky above is both cradle and executioner, both wonder and threat. Our task is to remember, to prepare, to honor those who survived before us, and to ensure that, if the heavens blaze once more, humanity will still endure to tell the story. There is a silence older than words, older than history itself. It rests in the stones scattered across deserts, hidden in jungles, and buried beneath the seas. It lingers in the myths told by firelight, in the rhythms of stars that drift unchanged above. Civilizations rise, flourish, and vanish, yet the stones remain. The myths endure. The stars keep watch. Stone is the patient witness of time. Long after parchment crumbles and circuits fail, stone still stands. The pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, the shattered ruins of forgotten cities. They speak without language, but their very presence insists upon memory. Even when we cannot decipher them, their weight presses upon us, whispering that others walked here before us, that we are not the first. Myth is the echo of survival. A flood remembered as punishment, a comet described as a fiery god, a lost island told of by philosophers. Myths travel where stone cannot, carried in the breath of storytellers, reshaped across generations, transformed but never erased. They remind us that fear and wonder were once entwined, that fire from the sky left not only craters but scars in human imagination. And above all, the stars. The same constellations that guided hunters across tundras and sailors across oceans shine on us tonight. Orion's belt, the Pleiades, the wandering planets, eternal markers in a shifting sky. To some they were gods, to others maps, to still others warnings. Their permanence outlasts us all, the canvas upon which each age paints its fleeting story. Odd fact, the oldest known depiction of a star map, carved into mammoth ivory 32,000 years ago, still aligns with the Pleiades cluster. Long before writing, humans were already recording the heavens, ensuring that memory reached beyond death. It was as though even then, we knew the stars would be our final archive. Perhaps when the Younger Dryas struck, when the skies darkened and the ice returned, survivors looked to the stars as their only constants. Their world collapsed, their knowledge scattered, but the constellations remained. In aligning their monuments with Orion, in inscribing myths of fire and flood, they placed memory where it could not easily be destroyed. This is the long memory of stone, myth, and stars, a trinity of endurance. While civilizations falter, these remain, carrying fragments of truth across ages. They do not preserve full stories, only shadows, questions, riddles. Yet sometimes shadows are enough to guide us, to remind us that history is not a straight path, but a circle of rise and fall. We like to think we are permanent, that our skyscrapers and satellites will stand as eternal as pyramids. But glass towers crumble faster than limestone blocks. Digital records vanish quicker than myths. Our monuments are fragile compared to the long patience of stone, the resilience of oral tradition, or the indifferent eternity of the stars. So what legacy will we leave, should the sky fall again? Will our memory endure as theirs did? In ruins that defy explanation, in myths that future peoples retell by firelight, in alignments of monuments pointing to the heavens? Or will we be erased entirely, leaving only a faint geological layer, a thin film of plastic, concrete, and carbon marking the Anthropocene? It is humbling to realize that our greatest defense against forgetting is not the technology we build, but the oldest forms of memory: rock, story, sky. They are the true archives of humanity, the bridge between worlds lost and worlds yet to come. As the documentary draws to a close, Picture once more the night sky. A shooting star streaks across it, beautiful and brief. To us, it is a moment of wonder. But to the long memory of the Earth, it is a reminder, a warning, a cycle repeating. Civilizations may fall, but memory lingers in the permanence of stone, in the persistence of myth, in the stillness of stars. And so we are left with a haunting thought. Perhaps the ruins we marvel at, the myths we retell, and the stars we chart are not only echoes of the past, but foreshadowings of our own fate. Perhaps one day, long after we are gone, stone will once again speak for us, myth will once again carry our shadows, and the stars will once again bear silent witness to a civilization that rose, burned bright, and vanished into time. The cycle continues, the memory endures, and the sky waits.